In 2013 I created my Two Thumbs Wildlife Trust, and that was to protect the land. Like, because we rehabilitate animals, you end up many generations of animals on the property, and I just thought, you know, if I sold it to someone who wasn't wildlife friendly, that would be a disaster. So on the 23rd of January, which is when my place got completely destroyed, yeah, a few days before we'd rescued another koala, and I had a koala that I'd had for some time, brought it back home, and I brought my two goannas back home. You know, so they were in their rehab enclosures. I went out for the day rescuing. We were looking for koalas to rescue, and we found one, a male, up a tree, and we managed to, with a tree climber and some flagging poles, we got him down. And I was ringing my fire captain, you know, to see if anything had happened out my way with this big wind that can restart a fire. Couldn't get onto him, so I decided to drive up there. And when, you know, driving along the Peakview Road, I could see that my place was definitely on fire. And when I got to my road, there was a police car stopping all traffic, and they decided to let me in because I explained, look, I've got two koalas there and two goannas, I'd like to get them out. I went into my place, and yeah, my house was completely burnt to the ground. It was still on fire, but completely collapsed and burnt to the ground. I had a second house with a big workshop behind it, and that's where I had my goannas, and that was all gone too, so I knew they were gone. So then I sort of just hoped, because I had a koala in an enclosure about 1.5 k's from the house, I was sort of hoping that might have been okay, and so I drove as quick as I could to that, and it was partially collapsed and on fire. And yeah, I saw her name was Greta, after Greta Thunberg, and yeah, she was burnt to death as well. What I've said to a few people is we need some good to come out of this tragedy, and you know, the koala, we've rescued more than 40 koalas, and we rescued like lizards and little wombats and kangaroos and wallabies, all sorts of things. And that's some of the good that comes out of it, that those animals that were suffering, because particularly in the early part, many of them were coming in with burns. So we had koalas which had burnt hands and feet. We've also had little joey koalas with burnt hands and feet that lost their mum in the fire. So that's very tragic, that, you know, imagine being a little joey koala out here for the first time by yourself, you know, because you've lost your mum in a bushfire, and you know, you've got burnt feet. Like, burns are so painful, and you know, those animals are out here still. Like, we found a little joey like that a couple of weeks ago, so it would have got burnt, you know, what are we now? Well, nearly 2 months before, you know. So there's these animals lingering out there. That's what we're trying to find. We need all the political parties to work together. So trying to change people's vote, I don't think that's the goal. You've got to get all the political parties to realise that we need to work together on this one. So that's where I think you just keep voting for whoever you want, but you write to them and say, what is the plan? And that plan has to be a plan that they work with whatever the other political parties are, and come up with a plan. Because like I said before, you know, 2 degrees of warming doesn't sound like much, but when you Google the weight of the Earth's atmosphere, and it's 5,750 trillion tonnes, you know, to heat that up takes trillions and trillions of kilojoules of energy. And that's what's turbocharging our weather. So it is a big problem. I did a calculation, I think in 2012, when the federal government listed the koala as vulnerable to extinction, because koalas eat nearly 1 kilo of leaf a night. And before white people came, the estimate is more than 10 million koalas. Whereas now it might only be 40,000 or less, they're not 100% sure. And I did a calculation based on koalas eating 500 grams a night, and what it means is that in a year they eat over 2 million tonnes of gum leaf. And gum leaf is the most explosively flammable part of the Australian bush. So people sometimes talk about other species doing hazard reduction sort of eating. The koala eats the most explosively flammable, so you know that could take, having a koala population a bit more normal could reduce some of that fuel load, which could help us with how powerful some of our bushfires are. So yeah, they talk about animals providing services. So another one that's important to look at is the bandicoot and the potoroo, because they get all this leaf litter, and instead of it sitting dry on the ground, they dig it into the soil and mulch it, and it keeps the soil moist and it keeps nutrition into the soil. So those animals are important for the forest. They all matter. They all play a role that helps keep a forest healthy, or whatever their environment is. So they call it symbiotic relationships, mutually beneficial relationships. So you know, that's what, what happened with the koala is that a lot of people don't know is in the late 1800s, early 1900s, they were hunted for their fur. So part of that low energy lifestyle is they have very insulating fur. And so they were making coats out of them and things like that. And the last open season was in August 1929, the last open season was in August 1927, and it was only in Queensland because at that time they thought they'd made them extinct in South Australia, Victoria and New South Wales. And so in 1 month, in August 1927, they sold 584,000 koala skins. So like the killing was on a scale that you wouldn't believe. And the koalas have never really recovered from that. So that's why you have these little forests like here. There would have been some that survived from the hunting days, and then they've slowly built up numbers to become a little bit noticeable. Whereas there used to be koalas, you know, pretty well continuously across, you know, we had a continuous forest up the east coast of Australia, and there would have been koalas all through it. I'm not going to ask you to change your vote, but what I would ask is that you write to whoever you vote for and ask them what is the plan for climate change, for fixing that. Because it's a huge problem, and it's driving the fires. As a volunteer rural fire service firefighter, we get told that, you know, we get updates and we're told the fire season's getting longer, the intensity's getting worse, and we've really, really seen it.